is every time I see that video, it makes me smile because I remember Chris Cote and I doing it together, and that high five. We had to do it like 10 times to actually make our hands connect, which was super funny. But here we are. Welcome, Barton.
Hey, how are you?
Good,
I'm really
good.
excited to be here. Yes, this is
Oh,
wonderful to reconnect with the community, especially the great honor of kicking off the new year. I mean, wow, we're how many days in, and it feels like we're half a year in. So,
I know. It's running. It's running like mad. We've got a great webcast here for everyone today. We're going to be talking about some exciting things in the world of seafood and fish. Barton is well learned and a well spoken teacher. He's at Harvard, I believe. I can't even believe that that's part of what you do. Looking chef to chef, it kind of blows my mind a little bit that you're there. Tell me a little bit about that before we get started.
well, before I dive into me, let's talk about everybody else that's here,
Yeah,
and the
let's look and
chef
see.
community, which is, it's easy to feel that these are dark days. We're in the United States. I'm in the United States right now. There, as you know from the news, there's a lot of turmoil and conflict. Uh, and in dark days, what is our shining light? It's love, right?
Yeah, looking
And
looking around here, I mean, we're
to
everywhere from Sri Lanka to Sweden to Botswana, Iceland, Australia. I mean, sitting here
we
having my morning tea with all these people, it's fabulous, right?
Well, I was saying that, in these times, just remember what an honor it is for us as service professionals to feed people. To feed a person is an act of love. It is an act of kindness. The world needs so much more of that. So to each and every one of you, to each and every one in your communities that you represent, thanks for what you do. So with that, we'll dive into seafood. So thanks for your question. A little bit about me. So I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., and then ended up living and working all over the world, including in Spain and Africa. And then I came back and was running restaurants for the inimitable chef Jose Andres. And then throughout a restaurant career, I got very interested in sustainable food systems, particularly seafood. And that passion led me to become an explorer with the National Geographic Society, amongst many other opportunities that I've had. And ultimately, I am interested in getting more people across all demographics to eat more seafood, because I think that with intention, with an eye towards sustainability and the environment, we can use seafood to create positive public health, environmental, and economic outcomes. And that's, I think, what I'm hoping to do today is to give you, everybody listening, permission to fall in love with seafood, not just as an ingredient, but really as a tool to accomplish the better world that Feed the Planet seeks to
That's
achieve.
amazing. I mean, so much of the time, I mean, I teach and speak about sustainability a lot, and as I'm sure you do as well. So much of the time, we're told often as chefs to have less, do less, cook less with all our seafood, be mindful, don't use too much, don't take too much, which is all true. But what you're saying here is, it makes my heart grow a few sizes bigger, which is because you're giving us the permission to start having and using more seafood. So let's look at start with where are we with seafood in the ocean right now? What is the state of seafood? Because I feel that as chefs, we've been told, don't use this, don't touch that, don't have this, don't put this on your menu. And I want to give everyone who's watching and listening permission. And where is it at?
Yeah. Well, there's certainly a lot yet to fix about our relationship with the oceans. There is absolutely horrific things happening in human rights abuses, as we've seen in headlines that splash up all too frequently. So this is by no means a broad brushstroke to say we're done, we're good, we got it right.
Okay.
But there is the headlines that we don't often read, right? And that is that we actually do know how to get things right. We have examples of where we are getting things right. And I think there's a lot of opportunity that we have to really invest in some of those systems to borrow a bit of that narrative as our own,
Hmm.
and as to really, as we keep using that word, permission.
Yeah.
So I'm part of a series called Hope in the Water, which is on PBS, which is the public broadcasting system here in the United States. I would urge all of you to check that out. Uh, it's really just about those headlines of things that are going right. And it begins to create a narrative that, well, we can get behind. But to your specific questions, like where are we with the oceans?
Yeah.
We need to fish better. Yes, there's a lot of fisheries out there that are overfished. About 35% of global fisheries are fished to the point where really they're depleted.
Yeah.
About 60%, though, is fished within biologically sustainable metrics.
Okay.
There's a lot of improvement that we can do in there. Namely, hey, we could be using more of each fish. We could be using a greater diversity of fish. We could be sending less fish to go feed pigs and cattle and chickens and other fish and use them for ourselves. What
Okay.
species am I talking about?
Yeah.
Anchovies. It's like my favorite fish in the sea, right? We
Yeah.
should be eating them.
Anchovy sandwich is my jam. That's all of it.
So we could also be getting more value per fish, and that's one of the topics I wanted to touch on today with Ikejime. And
Yeah.
then we'll transition into aquaculture, which is a new food system for in a large part. So short answer, hey, there's a lot going right. There's a lot to fix, but chefs,
Yeah, yeah.
you know what? We've got the tools we need in order to make the right decisions to move the whole needle forward.
Is there anything sort of that's sort of minding the oceans? Because I always wonder, like, who's taking care of all of our fish? Who knows what's actually happening? Because we can say, we can get resources locally or talk to our local, but is there anyone really watching, minding the store, the whole big planet of fish for us?
Well, the United Nations does, and there's a report that they put out, the United Nations SOFIA report, State of Fisheries International, uh, and that paints a really good picture. But no, 70% of our oceans are what's known as open ocean, meaning they do not fall under the management regime of any country or organization. So yeah, there's a lot of space
Open
out there.
water. A lot of open water, that's for sure.
However, there's a lot of fishing happens nearer to shore in the exclusive economic zones of the countries. And seafood is the most globally traded food commodity. It is more than double soy and corn combined.
Really?
So when we talk about fish, even though it might come from everywhere, we're pretty much talking about a unified system.
Yeah.
And one of the things that's coming that chefs we need to be aware of. I don't know if you've seen the news, but President Trump keeps threatening tariffs, taxes on trade globally.
Are
How
we
that's
heard?
seafood? No, yes, you heard. I think so. How that's going to hit seafood, we don't know because this is not a consistent narrative coming from the United States. So it seems rather punitive punishment at this point. But chefs, be aware of that the global trade in seafood might suddenly, well, with all ingredients, might get a whole lot more expensive, which is actually going to drive people to focus a little bit more on their localized systems, which I think is a major plus.
So looking at your local fishery as much as possible, I mean, being landlocked here in the center of Canada, you'd say, well, what kind of fish can I look to? But maybe we could look to something like lake fish or aquaculture
Mhm.
might be a way to look. So in the world of aquaculture, where are we at? Like what kind of innovations are happening? People have heard a little bit about it, I'm sure, as chefs, but what's sort of happening in the now?
Yeah,
Because I mean, you get your salmon, your trout,
yeah.
that's um,
Well, if I could preempt that, sort of picking up on the wild fisheries. So yeah,
yeah.
you're landlocked. One of the things that chefs really need to get our minds wrapped around is that frozen seafood, it's a new generation. It is a new product. Whatever you learned coming up, you know what? Frozen seafood earned a bad reputation. Why? Well, because it was sort of the last ditch effort to prevent it from throwing out, right?
Yeah.
But now frozen seafood is done oftentimes very close to the point of capture, close to the place of capture, uh, and done so with real intention to preserve quality.
Mm,
Now, that, A, helps the fisherman. Why? Because it stabilizes the cost or the price of the catch throughout the year. I mean, if
okay.
you have to sell your entire catch today, right, because it's fresh fish,
Yeah.
well, that puts a lot of pressure, downward pressure on markets.
Right.
But if you can sustain that bounty through the year, especially in places like Alaska, which have enormous volume of sustainable fisheries, it's really important. So as
Mm,
chefs, I think we need to get it through our heads that one of the very biggest things we can do to advance sustainability in our oceans is to embrace frozen seafood.
Okay.
Fresh will always have a place in our markets and our
Yeah.
kitchens,
Yeah.
absolutely. But here is a fact. Almost 50% of all seafood that's captured gets thrown out. Why? Because it's perishable, because of inefficiencies in the systems. And if you don't like frozen seafood, chef, here's another fact for you. In the
Yeah.
United States, and I think this is probably representative more or less globally, 40% of all fresh fish that comes into my kitchen,
Yeah.
I end up freezing on
Anyway.
premise.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, hey, why don't you let the experts with the real pro
Chill it properly, right?
do the freezing for you? Because there's two kinds of freezers. One is meant to get things frozen, and the ones that we have in our kitchens are meant to keep things frozen.
Yeah.
So we could get into the science of all this, but bottom
Yeah.
line is chefs embrace frozen seafood, look for quality producers. It's a huge thing we can do.
Oh, that's real food for thought. No, there's going to be many puns intended here.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
frozen, I mean, I was always a little bit, I guess, a snob as a chef, and I'm like, well, if it's not fresh, then I'm not using it.
Yeah.
But when you think about how fresh it can be, especially in a lot of places in the world where you can't access seafood easily, why wouldn't you bring in the freshest frozen product you can get, right? So,
And as
uh,
long as it's frozen correctly, it arrives correctly, you still need to go through your quality assessment and all.
traceability and all the things. It can be on the packaging because I've seen it. We get it in at the college I'm at as well, and you can see all the traceability labeling on it as well. So back
Yeah.
to aquaculture. So let's say I'm in Northern Ontario and I just happen to need some fish, and there's an aquaculture place nearby. Is that worth something? Are they all sustainable? Is there innovations that are more or less? What's happening there?
Well, I'm going to share with everyone else something that I happen to know about you, which is you're taking your class today at
Yeah, I'm
Long
very
Bus
excited.
to go to a fish farm, right? That's farming steelhead, maybe something else. Bottom line is, let's take a step back. What is aquaculture?
Yeah.
It's the farming of fish, shellfish, and aquatic plants for the purposes of mostly human consumption, but also for fuel, for feed ingredients, etc. When we're thinking about algae that's fermented and used in so many different ways. But by and large, aquaculture is the farming of fish and shellfish aquatic plants for our tables. Cool.
Mhm.
It's been around for thousands of years. People have been practicing this in various ways that are culturally and regionally relevant. But as a global industry, it's about 70 years old. That's when the first salmon net pen went into the water in Norway, about
Okay.
65 years ago, into Puget Sound in Washington State here in the United States. And from there on, then we had trout, and then we had the catfish industry.
Huh.
And then we had carp, which is globally that more carp is farmed than anything else, largely in China. Then you had swai, basa, tra, tilapia. Hey, these are species we've all seen cross our plates, or at least our order guides, right? Bottom line is, this is a brand new food system. I mean, I'm not 70 years old, I'm 45 years old, but I'm still architect of and witness to a food system that is being born in front of our eyes. And how cool is that, chefs? I mean, the last time we invented a food system was 10,000 years ago when we first furrowed the soil and planted the seeds of agriculture in modern civilization, right? Woo! Wait, we get to do that right now with aquaculture.
And
Of
support it.
course, we made some mistakes along the way. Of course, we're still making mistakes. But we're also innovating so quickly, doing such cool things with aquaculture. Like, man, as chefs, like how many of us embraced molecular gastronomy, right? I mean, we love new things. We love old things like charcuterie and applying our skill sets. Aquaculture is that. Think about it like that. It is an ancient thing like charcuterie, an ancient skill set that we are now innovating with in a modern way to produce delicious, very healthful, sustainable foods right within your backyard in landlocked Ontario.
Yeah.
In the United States, in the Midwest, of landlocked right smack in the middle of this giant country, we've got shrimp farms, we've got salmon farms, we've got really cool things happening.
Not to cold stop you there, but someone had a question.
Yeah.
So they were Scott out in Nova Scotia. He's really
Okay.
interested in perspective on the land farming and aqua farming. He says, but um, what are you thinking about as salmon as the most consumed fish? And quite often it's in a lot of our aquaculture.
Yeah. Well, we started farming salmon 70 years ago, not because salmon is a particularly easy fish to farm, but because there was a market for salmon. And
Mm,
we've gone through trial and error over the decades now, and we've gotten pretty good at farming salmon now, to the point where more than 50% of all farmed salmon globally, I think it's probably up to about 60 now, but I haven't checked. So let's just stay with 50, which is impressive. 50% plus is certified sustainable by Best Aquaculture Practices, Aquaculture Stewardship Council, Friend of the Sea, any of these rather good tools
mm,
that we as chefs. Are there still issues? Yeah. And chef, where you are up in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick, we see that because it's front and center. But we're also seeing the innovation where we're bringing aquaculture, which has traditionally been done in bodies of water,
yes,
but we're bringing it now onto land. And
yes.
we're seeing this in Wisconsin with Superior Fresh. We're seeing it in Maine with new farms bringing saltwater fish onto land. And this is really cool stuff. You know why? Because it doesn't have to happen in Nova Scotia or Maine in these rural places. There's shrimp farms popping up right outside of New York City in shipping containers.
Making it super
So
local.
all of a sudden, we are bringing the food production system to the people that need the food. Woohoo! Oh, that's really cool. And when you start thinking about the possibilities of this in Africa, in Southeast Asia, where you start creating these economic incentives and these global marketplaces that are really based on values and equity, then we get some really exciting stuff.
Hmm,
Again, this is not a broad brushstroke. There's a lot to fix. There's a lot of opportunity for abuse in this system.
yeah.
That's where we come in, right? Power of the white coat. Put this on with pride, make good decisions using the great tools we have access to, and push forward the world that we want to see.
So what is a chef able to do as far as their decision making? If they're looking at aquaculture, they're looking at things that are happening near them. What should they be choosing, or what makes a better choice?
Like everything in life, it's about relationships.
Okay.
If you have the opportunity to go see one of these operations, please
Yeah.
do. One of
Yeah.
the things that we as chefs really lack about aquaculture is a sense of connection. If I ask you to picture a farm in your brain, right? Like hey, where's your corn come from? You've got
Yeah.
a really good vision of it in your head. If I ask you to, hey, where's your salmon come from? You're like, yeah, the water, right? Go see this. Go create that relationship because that's what really matters. Also, and not only are you holding the producer responsible through that relationship, but they're holding you responsible. And there's a two-way street of learning. And the people that are willing to have you onto their farms, guess what? They're proud of what they're doing. It's the people that are proud of what they're doing that have values baked into what they're doing from the get-go. They're really proud to show off what they're doing. They want to see their product on your menus, right? They want to tell their story through you.
Yeah, the relationship really does matter. I mean, I like you said, I'm taking a class of mine out to it's Izumi Farm here in Ontario. I didn't even know it existed, but it's only an hour away from where our students are, and we're going to go see it. I'm super excited. We have someone asking also about what sort of feed, what sort of stuff are they doing in these for the fish? Do you
Yeah.
have any idea where that's going?
Well, that's one of the areas that I think is of most excitement. The other one is really what we're beginning to see is getting back to the other question about salmon is a diversification of species. Uh, though we now know how to grow salmon sustainably, there's also barramundi and cobia and
Wow.
yellowtail kingfish, kampachi, kanpachi, cereola. I mean, those are all pretty much the same fish. Getting
Funny.
to farm all sorts of different species in different places that are regionally, culturally relevant. And that's just from a Western perspective. When you start talking about Africa, when you start talking about Southeast Asia, woo, okay. Diversity of species is really key because some species are just better suited to being farmed, right?
Okay. Yeah,
So
yeah.
the biggest innovation, though, is coming in feed, because about 80% of both the cost input to raise a fish, as well as about 80% of the environmental impact
Yeah.
of growing fish is, in fact, what we have to feed them. In the
Yeah.
wild, no, I'm a salmon man. I'm just swimming around. I'm going to go eat my copepods and my squid and like whatever, right? We don't have to mess with that until we haul it on board. With farming, you are setting up the entire thing from scratch. So you need to create a diet that has to take into account fish welfare, flavor profile from the user perspective, growth rate, et cetera, as well as environmental sustainability.
Mhm.
This is where we really got things wrong at the outset. But the innovations that are happening now, I've done some work with a company called Biomar, which is a global leader in this. There's several other great companies that are doing this. Uh, but instead of feeding small fish like anchovies now to salmon, we're creating algae-based feeds where
Ah,
algae and then fermenting it and then feeding that. And that takes the place of fish meal and fish oil,
wow.
creating omega-3 nutritional profiles that not
What?
only fish welfare, so that's a healthier animal, but the nutritional profile for us on the user end. Woo!
Oh,
This is,
yeah.
but wait, it's not just algae. We're starting to just do things that make sense, like, hey, use fish heads and guts and all the things that we don't end up on our plates, right?
Yeah.
That's being repurposed, upcycled into fish feed. But then the innovations really get wacko from mycelium proteins, so mushrooms. There's
Ah,
people that are doing sugar cane waste. And instead of burning it in the fields, we're now fermenting that and turning that into feed. And get this, there's even a company that has inoculated a particular bacteria into the cooling towers of steel mills.
yeah.
This bacteria becomes a fermentable protein. Like, oh
Ah.
my gosh. And
So
you know,
finding
hey, when
gaps,
you're getting to your table, and
yeah. Sorry, so they're using gaps in the market to create feed then, or places that there might be waste is now becoming a consumable product, which in the end is great for everybody. Wow, this
great for
cycle
everyone.
is closing, which is good.
So does this conversation, ring true when a customer calls you out to the table and, well, tell me about this fish you're serving? It's like, well, you're not going to go into steel mills and bacteria and all
Oh,
that, but
no.
we're participating in a system that's really innovating, that's creating opportunity for people and product globally, and we're proud of that. Oh, and try the fish.
That's amazing because someone was asking, Michelle was asking, from a customer perspective, sometimes they get asked a lot about like there's a bit of stigma with farm fish thinking old school thoughts. So this is a great share, right? That
Well, I think that the comment there is you're absolutely right. Aquaculture, the farming of fish and shellfish, has had some issues. However, we've done some work to identify really great best in class producers. And I think it's time for us to give aquaculture another look. That's the key there, is to acknowledge, to say, yes, customer, you're right. There are some issues, but also to say, but please come with me on the same journey I've been on, because there's good to be found here.
yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I love the story of aquaculture and wild fish. Like we're looking at both sides of it. What about something fascinating? I know you know quite some about caviar. Tell us a little bit about what's happening in the world of caviar. That's
Well,
something
just
everybody
on
wanted
stuff.
to hear for.
Caviar is one of the fastest growing food categories in terms of demand. As wealth rises, as people just become more familiar with it, as chefs become more familiar with it. Uh, what a fun ingredient. It's
Yeah.
like, it's not just caviar. It's not just black eggs that you throw on top and they're salty. Like, woo, man, the diversity and variety that's present in this. And I'm talking fish to fish. And I've begun some work with a company called Brown Trading to help them on some sustainability initiatives. And I've had this incredible opportunity to taste as we're packing. And I'm talking like the Pinot Noir from this vineyard is different than the Pinot Noir from the vineyard across the street, right?
The
We all
terroir
know that.
matters, right?
Terroir matters, but fish to fish, like this kilo of caviar, same pond, harvested the same day, salted the same way, and it's so wonderfully different. But one of the things about caviar that's really interesting is they're farmers that are really leading the way. in terms of sustainability. There's a consortium of French caviar producers that has signed on to agree to do a blue impact feed. And this is going back to that company, Biomar, where they're reducing their carbon footprint, creating social good through what they, through the feed ingredients that they're adding in, and really just showcasing that aquaculture is an opportunity to create food really with intention. Right?
Hmm.
And what's really fun about this is caviar. It's an endangered species, right?
Yes.
That's all we've heard about it.
Yes.
To flip that narrative as chefs, to be able to say, yes, but here it is. Here's the
Oh, look
good
at
thing.
you, show and tell.
Oh, I got plenty of stuff over here to show and tell. But the idea that we can say, yes, the narrative of depletion, of destruction, of the decimated ecosystems, we've flipped that. And I am giving you permission to fall in love with this. It comes back to that. And that's that narrative. And the very best ingredient we put forth on any plate is gratitude and intention, right? And when we put ourselves behind the decisions we make of the ingredients we serve, it just tastes better. It sells better. Our customers, our guests, our service staff gets more engaged, et cetera. So there's just a lot of fun stuff happening in caviar. So I would urge you to look around. There's great producers, Belgium, Israel, Italy, Poland, the United States, likely where you are. There's a number of them in China as well that are doing pretty okay with stuff, if not outright leading. So
I mean, it's great to hear. I mean, it's been such a faux pas to put it on the menu or think that you can put it everywhere, but now we can happily indulge a little and share that with people. That's that's so great.
well, you
So
still have to do your work. You still have to
yeah, of
find
course,
the
the
right
background.
product. But just from a creative standpoint as well, if I may, it's not just this thing that you put forth in this very traditional way with red onions and egg, hard-boiled eggs. Like, no, chef, have some fun. Dice up some preserved lemon zest, throw in some toasted fennel seeds. I don't know, some pickled mustard seeds, put it on a potato chip. Even a Dorito goes really well with, caviar. Have some fun. That's
Yeah.
what these new generations of diners are looking to us to do. So incorporate some flavors. If there's a curry dusted potato chip, something like that,
Wonderful.
use your creativity to make this ingredient, make this tradition your own.
That's one. I mean, it's sounding more and more like we could fall in love with seafood again, right? Like it really. I felt sort of a little bit of trepidation in putting it on menus. We do have someone who asked. It's Oliver. I think he's in Myanmar there, and he's talking about seagrass. And if you've done any cooking or heard about it at all, because it consumes 5 times more CO2 than usual trees and 2 to 3 times more mangroves. Do you know much? This is totally outside of my understanding because I don't know anything about seagrass. Do you have any?
Yeah, I do. So not from a culinary perspective though.
Okay.
I know a little bit more of the kelp, Alaria dulce, wakame, the species that we are a little bit more familiar with as they have more market penetration. I don't actually know of any culinary uses for seagrass, but I do know of their environmental importance. So seagrass covers 2% of our planet's surface, but it accounts for 11% of the absorption of carbon dioxide into the
Wow.
environment. So its importance is so outsized that what we need to be focused on with that is really the restoration of seagrass, eelgrass beds. The other thing that they do is much like mangroves, they are an essential habitat for juvenile specimens of many, many species. Thousands of species rely on that ecosystem in order to hide from predators, to find food, etc.
Would they
So
be able to put something like that into an aquaculture farm, like just in your mind's eye, or is that something that has to sort of?
I mean, I've not seen it from a culinary perspective for a purpose, but I have participated in reseeding efforts. Go out there at low tide and just place your plugs as though you were planting grass.
Very
So
fun.
certainly that is a form of aquaculture, just with a different intention. So certainly that's out there.
And coming back, I mean, we were going to speak because I mean, the name of our pod or webcast today is The Art of Ikejime. Can you share a little bit about that? Because, I'm sure some people are here just to find out about that too, right?
Cool. Well, Ikejime, this gets back to our earlier part of our discussion is sort of what can we do for wild capture fisheries?
Yeah.
Uh, and Ikejime means to kill with consideration, or to kill with purpose or intent. It is a Japanese method that demands that a fish is killed immediately after being brought on board.
Okay.
So when we think of fishing, we often think of just like a big net pulling through the water, right? And to be perfectly clear, no fish caught in a net has ever died a good death, right?
Mhm.
And this is something that we as chefs are going to have to reckon with from a animal welfare, from a moral perspective. And I'm not really exactly clear on where I stand on that. It's something that is in my own philosophical moral journey I'm considering. But the idea that a fish, when taken on board, is killed immediately is not only sort of an obvious choice for the ethics of this, but it also retains quality because it gives us sort of the ability to control taste and texture, freshness. When a fish dies, it is a stressful moment, right? And we know this with slaughter of land animals, that it has to be done in a certain way in order to prevent lactic acid buildup and stress hormones and just all that happens to change the physiology of the fish. Plus, when you kill a fish immediately, and it's done by spiking the brain with a metal spike, which seems brutal, but it's quick, it's instant, and it's, I guess, as humane as we can make it. What it does is it prevents those stress markers, chemicals from entering into the fish.
Yeah.
Helps us to maintain quality because it doesn't thrash around as much. So you're not getting these micro tears that then filled with blood and bacteria. And not to get too into the weeds on this, but bottom line is what you end up with is a fish of incredibly higher quality with a longer shelf life.
Because
And
of how its life has been taken.
yeah,
Wow.
and then the Shinkejime, which is when you take a metal wire and you spike the spinal cord, and that really sets rigor mortis into motion. And so you end up
Yeah.
with just this like wacko quality fish. And I'm
Amazing.
telling you, I can give you like a pristine, beautiful cod that's caught in the traditional manner
Yeah.
and put it next to an Ikejime cod, and you'd think they were two different fish.
Really?
And that's not to say that the traditional cod is there's anything wrong with that.
Oh, just
It's
different. Yeah.
just that much better. And this is
Ah,
something that aquaculture, I think, really has an opportunity because they have so much more control over the harvest. Um, but what I really like about this is, yes, it takes more time on the boat when you capture fish to do this one by one, but the value that each fish then brings in terms of that increased quality. So it's less fish out of the ocean for greater use,
yes. Yeah.
greater profitability throughout the supply chain. So it ends up being that idea of when we place intention into the system, everything else has a more positive outcome because of that.
Wow. So, we're getting close to our end, and I don't want to just tie this up without any takeaways. And we do have one or two questions that I'd like to get to. I know there's been lots. I've been trying to insert them as we can. So, tell me, what would you say? This is a lot of information on seafood, and I really appreciate you sharing, Barton. You have a wealth of understanding and information. You share some of this at Harvard as well, I believe, right? Which
Yeah.
from chef to chef, that seems to me pretty awesome that you're there. Tell me a little bit about that. And then we're
Thank you. So my class actually starts today, a little bit later on, and it's culinary and nutritional medicine for brain health. And brain health, this is the most important organ that we have in our body. And we need to begin to think more about how we eat in order for optimized brain performance. And this is not only just like, hey, I want to be on it today, right? I want to be on it when I'm 90 years old too. And I want moms and babies to have what they need to really thrive, to grow our brains. So when I talk about seafood as positive public health outcomes, this is one of top and foremost there. And this is a conversation that chefs, we're going to start to think about, not only for our own well-being, which I urge you to consider ourselves first,
Yeah.
sustain the sustainers. We can't spread our love if we in fact don't love ourselves, right?
Yes.
So there's that, but this is going to be a global conversation that's really growing. And here's my entire Harvard course in a nutshell. Eat some seafood, not a whole lot of red meat, lots of greens, lots of green leafy vegetables and whole grains. And you, my friend, are going to be much better off for it. But
You'll be just fine. That's great. It's wonderful that you get to share. I mean, going from chef into all the wonderful aspects of sort of the science and the understanding and the depth of knowledge that you have to share with us today. I'm going to ask you, what would you say? You know, we've got a lot of chefs out there watching today. What would be their sort of takeaway piece? There's been a lot of pieces that you've said, but what should they be mindful of, or what should they look at when they're creating menus moving forward?
uh, that seafood is a category that is innovating in front of our eyes. Whether we're paying attention to it or not is, I think, what this is all about today. I've got some other samples here that I wanted to
Yeah,
show
sure, sure,
that
sure.
speak to this. So in addition to just, hey, there's a sustainability aspect to this, or hey, there's maybe species I haven't heard of before, maybe a barramundi, right? Like it sounds like something that a monster would like hop out of a closet and say, oh, barramundi, right?
I love it.
Right. But like it's also a really silly, tasty fish.
Yeah.
But some of the other things that we're beginning to see, led by the incredible chef Josh Nyland, as well as a guy named Dry Aged Fish Guy. Look that up on Instagram. Dry aging fish, like this is a dorade from Feta La Palma, which is now Lubamar out of Spain.
Yeah.
Really, really innovative farm. So the scales been taken off so that there's no moisture on the outside and then hung to dry. You've all had dry aged beef, right? We all understand that a fresh kill pig is not as good as something that has age time to really bloom into itself, right?
Is
With
it
fish,
salted? Is it salted too, or just dry aged?
it's dry aged in a humidity controlled, moisture controlled
Wow,
environment.
I have not seen
What
this. I
has
used to
to
have
happen
Dorado on my menu all the time.
that bacteria needs to be not present, right? Fresh fish will spoil only because of the presence of that bacteria. So if you kill with intention and then transport with intention and then handle with intention, the result of this, yeah, it took a little more time. But guess
Yes.
what? I've now got a product that is so unique to me, to my own little ecosystem in my kitchen, right? And the result, woo, if you thought you loved Dorade before, uh-uh, you've never tried this. Let me show you
Exciting.
another one
Yeah.
more, just because I've got it. And there's some leading producers who are doing this, some vendors like Brown Trading who is doing this, others that's just in America. But check this out. This is a
Wow.
piece of bluefin tuna toro. And yes, I serve bluefin tuna. Why? Well, because we got it right. And in the Gulf of Maine and the Western Atlantic right now, this is a fish worth supporting. But look at
Wow.
that glistening fat like Wagyu beef, right? So
Not
this is
marveling
aged,
plenty.
aged for about 10 days. I mean, it's literally glistening, right? And the texture of this, it literally melts.
Nope.
So
That's
not
amazing.
only do we have this opportunity as chefs to like just explore the category more, but even within the familiar ingredients, we have opportunity to innovate in ways that shows our guests that we really care, but also that gets us just as individuals and as teachers, as leaders, really excited about
Yeah.
the ingredient category.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to find some of that for my class for sure. We have um, almost no time here. We've gotten to most of the questions, I think, in some way, shape, or form. There's a few we haven't, but you've covered so much information. I feel like you said, it is falling in love with seafood again, and you've got me excited about some new products and what I could try and where to look for. And I think it's looking to what's happening in the industry, starting to create that real relationship with your seafood purveyors, suppliers, going to the source, finding out what it is, and exploring that a little bit, I think is going to make you a better chef and have more tools in your toolkit for sure.
Yeah.
That's where I think we're going.
Hey, this tide is rising. This wave is crashing over us. We might as well take advantage of it, right?
Ride it out. Well, thank you very much, Chef, and thank you everyone at home from everywhere. I see from Florida to Sri Lanka to Egypt to, I mean, not far from me here in Canada and you in the States and all across the globe for joining us here on Sustainability Around the World with World Chefs. It has been amazing speaking with you. I appreciate you all taking the time. We did go a little over, but there was so much to cover. Barton has put his email in there if you have more questions. Wow, wow,
Oh,
wow. That's
please
amazing.
do. So there's
And
my
then,
email. Hey, we're all friends here, right? I mean,
yeah.
chef is a
And
chef, is
then,
a brother, is a sister. So here we are. That's my email. Reach out to me if you're interested in learning
more
more about
stuff.
any of this. And
That's
I
amazing.
couldn't even type because my hands are glistening of the fat that came.
I think it's a good facial rub a little bit, right? But even there's a link in there that Isla, who's in the background there, always helping us, which thank you very much. Some links from Barton about Ikejime and brown trading and some of the other things he's spoken about. So grab those now and enjoy the rest of your day, morning, afternoon, and evening, wherever you are. And thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate all of you. Much love.